How's it going, guys? And welcome to the Football Diary podcast once again. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm here with Dave today. How are you doing, man? You all right?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's been a good weekend of football, hasn't it? Starting off with Arsenal Spurs, I think, today, because, I mean, they've won the North London Derby 3-1. And who'd have thought that had been the case at the start of the month? It was a decent performance from the Gunners, really, wasn't it? And how many times have we actually said that about Arsenal? Credit where it's due. They played really well. Although having said that, Spurs were equally shocking, weren't they?
Yeah, it a strong, fast first half from Arsenal. Not seen too much of late. So, I mean, like you say, Tottenham were abysmal.
Yeah.
They made it easy for them. But I mean,
Yeah,
you've
I think with
credit.
Spurs, I couldn't notice any system in particular. That was my thing. I looked at how they were playing, and I could see the formation, what it was meant to be. But in terms of answering like Arsenal's threat, they had no intensity whatsoever, from what I could tell, and that's why Arsenal sort of went 3-0 ahead within 40 minutes.
I mean, so yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I think one thing I've noticed about Arsenal of late is even though they've obviously been, well off the pace for a number of years now, it seems to be one of the only number of games that they actually get up for in Tottenham. They always seem to be well up for it, and have played
Yeah,
well. United, it seems like it just seems like obviously we know there's a mentality problem potentially there with Arsenal players anyway.
yeah,
Kind of find consistency against every team you come up against, but they didn't struggle to get a foothold in the game at all. They kind of, it was. I'm sure even Arsenal fans were probably surprised by how well they played. They were well rewarded with those 3 goals, and
yeah.
Aubameyang looked, more like his old self. He's not really looked anything like his old self for quite a while
True.
now, quite a few months. And they had that cutting edge, which Tottenham didn't really have. Tottenham had a couple of half chances in the first half that they just looked almost disinterested, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's the thing. Arsenal had the intensity from the start, and it was no surprise when they did go 1-0 up eventually. But I just thought the forward play and the transition from defence to attack was made really easy by the fact that Spurs had no midfield. You know, they had, I think, Højbjerg, Ali, and you couldn't see any of them sort of putting a foot in. And Ndombele, who was pretty much anonymous for most of the first half, especially. And Arsenal just ran straight through them. I think Smith Rowe had a fantastic game. I thought Odegaard as well was the first time I've really seen him sort of connect play for Arsenal, and he impressed me too. And obviously Saka had a fantastic game as well, and he's had a fantastic start to the season, really, which is good to see. So I think those three players give me an indication, really, of what the Arteta way is probably going to be. He's kind of invested in youth, and I think we've seen maybe half the team were Arteta signings, from what I could tell. So this is the first sort of sign, really, of what kind of system he wants and what kind of style of football he's aiming for. Because they had Ben White back in a team, they had Gabriel together with him, and I thought they did well. Credit for Aaron Ramsdale as well. I didn't expect him to be as much of a presence in the 6-yard box as he has been. He was shouting at his defence constantly, and I think Arsenal have really needed that, really, haven't they, lately? But he was such a presence, and I think he's been brought in for his distribution. But I thought it was more the way he commanded his area that Arsenal benefited from the most. So, yeah, a bit more of an Arsenal system, I think, that you could kind of tell they were trying to achieve something for the first time in a while.
Yeah, it's probably, I'd say, for the first few games, we obviously said Arsenal were in a bit of a mess and probably a crisis already. After 2-3 games,
Yeah.
to give credit to them, they've kind of turned it. I won't obviously say turned it around. So, they've kind of been able to put a couple of results together, and obviously, by beating your bitter rivals, Spurs, that can only kind of do wonders for their confidence. So, they'll be looking to push on from this, and see where they climb the table if they can. And a lot of people will begin saying they're a bit of an outsider to kind of challenge for those top spots. Obviously, they're not going to challenge for the title, but potentially, who knows, if they can get around fourth, fifth. That would be brilliant for them, because I don't think their fans are expecting it.
No, I think the start to the season they had was 3 defeats on the bounce. I think it's good that they are where they are now. They've recovered really well, but I think a lot of it hinged on some of those new signings and their best 11 sort of coming back into play. I still don't think their squad's deep enough to sort of challenge for top 4. Definitely not. But their starting 11, now it's been assembled, looks pretty strong. I mean, on the other hand, Spurs were at full strength as well, pretty much. I didn't see anything from the Spurs team that looked like they were missing anyone. So what the hell happened to Spurs? Because their players just didn't look up for it. Nuno was on the sidelines looking like dejected right from the first minute. What's going on? Is this to do with the manager? I mean, it was manager of the month last month, and now he's kind of looking like his head's on the chopping block all of a sudden.
I think it would be harsh for him to lose his job this early. And you've also got to remember the chairman decided to keep players that don't want to be there. Harry Kane didn't want to stay at Tottenham, and Dombele didn't want to stay, and they're both in the first 11. So what sort of effect does that have on the squad members and them when you've got 2 key players in the first 11 that don't want to be there? So, I mean, I think it'd be harsh to get rid of him, this early on in the season, even potentially see where they are in, a couple of months' time, kind of reassess them. But, to talk about him kind of potentially go a little bit premature. But yeah, that it's Kane's obviously not scored so far in the Premier League, so I'm not really sure if that move is really kind of playing on his mind. They had a decent start. Obviously, they won the first 3 games, didn't they? And got a little bit pear-shaped since then, but it's hard to know. I'm still not sure if he potentially knows what his best team is as well, Nuno. Obviously, they've brought Dele Alli back into the team, who was completely absent under Mourinho. Son's the only one who's really kind of done anything of note so far this season. I feel like Spurs, he kicked in important goals, won them a couple of games. So I think he's probably one of the only players who can kind of hold his head high. It's difficult for them, obviously. They didn't really sign any, make any key signings in the window, and it's difficult to see how they can improve on last year when a lot of other teams have further improved if they can make, it's unlikely they make top 4, to be honest. So
yeah, I think so. I think they've got to change a lot of things there, because they were top of the table, but statistically they weren't meant to be, really. Like, the statistics showed that they were bottom for most metrics other than points. So they were kind of overperforming for the start of the season. So we predicted, didn't we? Miles was quite strong about it as well, saying that Spurs are in big trouble, pretty much, especially with the Kane situation not resolving itself. But I don't know if they'd be any better without him. That's the thing. The rest of the team just looks like there's no system in place for them. They played with like a 4-3-3 sort of system. It just didn't work. But it's all stemmed from the midfield. The midfield just wasn't bothered. And I think if there's no desire to raise your intensity for a North London derby in front of a packed Emirates Stadium, that's pretty worrying, isn't it, really? I mean, he's got a lot on his hands, Nuno, to turn this team around. I reckon, seriously, Nuno might well be out the door at some point this season. And I would not be surprised to see him back at Wolves. Weirdly.
Well, Wolves are doing well at the minute. Why do they want to get rid of their manager? They've actually performed well. They were unfortunate to get early on in the season. They just couldn't score goals. They've obviously, done well in the last couple of games. So why would they want him back? If they carry on how they're doing now, then
Yeah, it could happen. I think if Wolves had a slide, I think they could probably look elsewhere. And if Nuno's available, they were happy together. I don't think they even wanted to part ways. So it's not a massive shot in the dark, is it? It could happen. But Spurs have got problems, it's fair to say. Chelsea losing for the first time this season against City as well. Gabriel Jesus with the winning goal. City were damn impressive, weren't they? They set up brilliantly against Chelsea, and I've never seen a Guardiola team this up for a game. I think he really felt like he had a point to prove against the Thomas Tuchel team because he's not won against them in any attempts so far, has he, in the Premier League? And they looked really up for it. The press from the front players was impossible for Chelsea to deal with, really. They had no answer to it.
Yeah, I think, it was an interesting performance, I feel, by Man City. I don't know if many people saw that come in. I think Chelsea probably would have been marked as a favourite for that, how they've performed so far this season. So it was a surprise. The result, potentially not so much. I think the performance was more of a surprise. They were fairly dominant much of the game. I feel as though Chelsea were potentially handicapped a little bit by Reece James going off. I feel like that kind of disrupted their shape a little bit, and they had to make a couple of changes.
Maybe.
To change shape. I feel as though that kind of, they lacked that sort of what he gives them down that right. He kind of, he gets up and down that wing really quickly. He can offer a real threat going forward. And so I feel as though they missed him once he went off. So
yeah,
I wouldn't read too much into it. It's still early days, and we've seen Man City nearly lose to Southampton, lose to Tottenham earlier on.
True.
So it's all about consistency. Whoever whoever that is, it's a little bit up in the air at the moment, and it just makes for a really good league. And the results this weekend, of we've had some real eye openers, really.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the way Chelsea set up surprised me. They were a bit conservative, I thought, and they didn't have much of a link between midfield and attack. So they had 0 shots on target for the whole game, which is rare. So they had no Kai Havertz, no Ziyech, no Mount. So their midfield was kind of starved of creativity, I thought. And they didn't look like a threat at all. But I mean, it started off with the Man City front line just harassing the Chelsea defence constantly for the ball, forcing them into mistakes that they didn't want to make. And that was kept up for pretty much the whole game. And credit to City for that, really. I didn't expect them to have that kind of intensity for that longer time. And Chelsea found it difficult to even get out of their own half sometimes, which is crazy because they've been one of the most creative attacking teams in the league so far. So, yeah, a really solid, impressive display from City. But like you said, in every game they've played so far against each other since Tuchel's been there, definitely, it's been like a 50-50, hasn't it, in terms of who could win it? And the game's played out pretty evenly, but Chelsea have just won on small margins. I think this is the first time I've seen any one of these teams outplay the other. I didn't think Chelsea looked like getting close, but City dominated throughout. So as far as statements of intent go, I think Guardiola is definitely having his say now as to who's going to be featuring in a title race, because the talk's been mostly about Chelsea, hasn't it? I think this is the first time I've seen it kind of turn slightly more towards City's favour. So, fair play to him for that. And I thought Rodri was fantastic in midfield. Grealish was brilliant as well, coming in from the inside. So it was the first time I think all players in the City lineup actually played at the top of their game, and it paid off.
Yeah, I think Chelsea really needed a top performance from Lukaku, not just kind of offering a threat, but they just couldn't hold on to the ball.
No. Just
to relieve that pressure. And we've seen it, we've seen it with Lukaku for United. Obviously, it's a couple of years now, but it can be frustrating sometimes when he's capable of, how big he is and how much of a unit and his physicality that he offers. he's just quite inconsistent in his touch sometimes and being able to hold onto the ball, and other players into play. And I just feel as though that sort of pressure and intensity that City had it was just proved to be a little bit too much for him. I think
Yeah.
a couple of others, it just they couldn't really get a foothold, and yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, I think. But also we know what Man City are capable of doing, and we know they're capable of putting those performances in from time to time. Maybe we've not seen it as consistently over this last year or so. You know, they still won the league last year, but it was more of a vintage performance from them, I feel.
Yeah. I think the top of the table is looking quite interesting now. There's quite a few teams level on points. There's probably 6 or 7 teams within touching distance of top spot. One of those is still Manchester United, even though they lost at home 1-0 to Aston Villa. So Miles isn't here on the pod today. So I've got to say on his behalf how great Villa performed. You know, credit to them, huge credit to them. They frustrated United pretty well, and when they had the ball, they made it count. I thought their midfield absolutely outplayed United. That's not saying much because McTominay and Fred provided very little in the way of creativity or breaking up play. But I thought John McGinn and Douglas Luiz were equally as impressive for Villa as they were disappointing for United. So I think the midfield was a key battleground that was lost for them at the end of the day. But United had chances, didn't they? They created, I think, 28 attempts at goal, but only had 4 on target. Why can't they put the ball in the back of the net? This is like the second game in a row where United have created miles more chances than the opponent, but just can't win.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's nothing new because obviously we saw against West Ham in the cup midweek, although it was a completely different team. It seems like players are almost urged to kind of shoot on side. You know, it's frustrating because there are a lot of shots that have kind of come from long range and long distance. But there just seems to be a lack of creativity from actual patterns of play. And it shows through what our XG is in this. You know, in these last couple of games, ours was low, and we had 28 attempts. You know, it just kind of tells you all you need to know, really. That we just look like we don't really know how to play a team at times, and we always, whenever we do play well, it's always in moments. We've never played. I can't remember the last time we played well for a full game.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of pundits have said it for a while now. A lot of, you know, even Gary Neville was saying, I think it's the first time probably potentially said something about the coaching set that doesn't put a very good light on them in that we don't play as a team. And, you know, he's Solskjaer's been in charge for 3 years now. I mean, I feel like we should be showing more. And with the players that we've got this season, the acquisitions, being able to, you know, to bring in Ronaldo, Varane, and Sancho, it just looks very much like square pegs, round holes sometimes, and nobody, like, players seem to not really know what their role is. And yeah, you're right. McTominay and Fred were absolutely terrible at this game, but it's almost like they don't know when to drop in. They don't know where they should be positionally. We look so open on the counter attack. We're so, you know, in the last few games, what is it, 1 clean sheet in 8 games now?
Yeah, it's shocking.
The amount of individual mistakes that we've had recently, I think Maguire has given away a clear chance these last few games. I don't know. It was another one this game, obviously, with his pass back to De Gea. So it is a bit of a worry for me because the start of the season was a chance to kind of get the points on the board, and we dropped points against Villa at home. and we've got a point to get Southampton.
Yeah.
Games that really we should be winning if we want to start a win. I can't help but be. I can't say that I think I've got no hope that we're going to challenge the title this game because we don't look like we can be consistent enough or put in.
Well, you say square pegs and round holes. What about if the system was put in place to suit the players? So, for example, Solskjaer plays this like rigid 4-2-3-1, doesn't he, with Ronaldo up front on his own and 3 behind? Why don't we just go 4-3-3? You know, Pogba doesn't look comfortable on the left. We've got Sancho, who should be tearing up the right-hand side and providing chances and creativity. He's not getting a look in. Greenwood has been told to shoot on sight, which is fair enough when he's a central striker. But when he's got the greatest goal scorer of all time pretty much in front of him, why is he not squaring it more often? The system, the formation doesn't suit the players at all. And as long as he sticks with this 4-2-3-1 and insists on playing Fred and McTominay, I just don't think it's going to work.
But, it seems like he's not confident enough to play, just one defensive midfielder and not two.
Yeah.
Defensive midfielder at home. I don't feel like he thinks McTominay is a defensive midfielder. That's the thing.
He's not, though.
Well, no, but I don't feel like he offers enough going forward. I don't think he's good enough to dictate play, which we need to do because we can't control games. Yeah. And he's not consistently good enough defensively either. So what is he? If he can't do one thing, competently.
Yeah.
I think that was his worst game I've seen from him in a long while. I'm not telling it.
It's pretty poor.
Nothing really came off. And Fred, we know his limitations on the ball. He's just not good enough, especially for £50 million. Defensively, you get the work rate from him. You can intercept and you can press. But, that's the very minimum you should expect for it, especially playing for a team like Man United. So there's work that needs to be done. I don't know why we've gone to this season not in a midfielder. Whether Solskjaer thought we didn't need one, or apparently there's rumours saying there wasn't the right midfielder that we wanted in the market. Like, there's plenty of midfielders out there that would have been an improvement. I think I'd have taken Bissouma from Brighton, and he would have been an improvement on both.
Definitely.
So
it's a strange one because when he's making substitutions that just don't make sense as well. Like we're looking for a goal, we're looking for a breakthrough, and it's not scoring goals that's the problem because Ronaldo's just not been getting the service. Basically, has he? It's the creativity that's missing, and he turns to the bench and brings on another forward with Cavani. Why not Jadon Sancho? It was crying out for Jadon Sancho. Why not even like an informed Jesse Lingard, to just bring him on to provide some creativity? He's not brave enough to make those calls sometimes. And I just don't understand it because he's got players that would have fit the problem and kind of answered the questions that were being asked by Villa quite nicely. But he brought Cavani on and I just don't get it. Cavani would have been as equally frustrated as Ronaldo and got no service. And as that proved to be the case. So it baffles me sometimes. It really does.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no surprise anymore with, what was it, the 80th minute brought Cavani on. Obviously the first two subs it's because it was forced, it was because of injury. And he brings Cavani and you looked at that game and I thought that was a game that was kind of made for Jadon Sancho. I thought it played out a little bit more like a Bundesliga game. Like it seemed like players had more time on the ball going forward and on the counter. It seemed like there were counter attacks, from both teams, and that could have really. I don't really know why he brought Cavani on that late on. It was strange for me. Again, he reacts too late. When you're getting players like Van de Beek and Cavani getting 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the game, it must be a real. Just very disheartening for me. It would be.
Well, I was thinking in that situation, I know I've mentioned Sancho and I mentioned Lingard as people he could have brought on. I mean, if he'd have turned to Van der Beek and said, your time's up, mate. Your time's here now. This is the chance for you to make a difference. Go out and win us the game. I thought he'd have been well motivated if Solskjaer had trusted him that much in a game like this. But no, he still plays it really safe. It's very frustrating. I mean, what was it, Everton at home next for United on Saturday? Is that now like a must-win game, do you think? Because it feels like we're sliding a bit, doesn't it?
For me, if we lose against Villarreal in the Champions League, I think time's up. For me, his time was up.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
What does that tell you? If we can't beat the young boys, we can't beat Villarreal with a team that we have in. We have big players, big personalities in there, looking almost like they don't know who to look to because they don't know why. I don't know if they don't know why we aren't playing well. We've got all these players, all these talented players. We can't put consistent performances together. We never been convincingly, and it's a worry. And like I said, it's been 3 years now, and we still don't look like a team with any sort of style of play.
Yeah,
and that's if it wasn't Solskjaer, he would have. If it wasn't a previous legend of the club, he wouldn't be here. He would have gone probably 18 months ago now.
Yeah.
But
just to be clear, though, I think you're with me in saying that you've never wanted Solskjaer to fail. You've always been rooting for him. And I think if anyone was going to bring the club back to success, it would be even better if it was somebody who was like revered in the club's history as much as he is. But we've always been aware that he's such a limited manager because he's not had any top level experience, and it was always going to catch up with him at some point. He's learning on the job. But the problem is he's making mistakes as a coach, but not learning from them either. So he's not really learning on the job either. You'd think by now he'd realise that McTominay and Fred are not a dependable partnership at this level. You think by now that, on the hour mark, you should really be looking to bring on some substitutions to make an impact, not 20 minutes later. Do you know what I mean? But he's not learning from that. You'd think that he would take the initiative and sort of go on the offensive against teams that are there for the taking. But no, he still plays it really conservatively. So am I Solskjaer out? No, not really. I'd rather he wasn't bad enough to get the sack, and I'm not rooting for a defeat like some United fans are on social media, which is ridiculous. But he's never been, and probably will never be, good enough for United.
Yeah, I think that's the way a lot of people are looking at it now. And I think the media are starting to realise it. Seeing more things in the tabloids about it, record.
Yeah.
About obviously, when we went out in the League Cup, and it's been knocked out of 18 cups now while Chargers went out with.
Wow.
Being recognised, and I think there's a realisation that he is struggling, and I feel as though a lot of United fans have kind of known it for a while. I mean, like you say, I'll always support him and want him to do well. And the last thing you want to see is, the club legend go out and sort of that sort of manner. And it'd be brilliant if he could even win something. I would have loved, I think it would be great if he could win something. But you look at the competitions we're left in now in FA Cup, Champions League. It's going to be difficult. There's a lot of good teams in the league now. We've just gone out to West Ham. So yeah, it's any sort of victory in any competition is going to be very difficult. But I feel as though, you look at Chelsea last season, obviously they got rid of Lampard. They got Tuchel in, and a league challenge because they were just a little bit kind of too far back at that point. But they've obviously went on and won the Champions League. So you look at the managers that are out there, and there are names that could come into United. It's always a gamble. Obviously, you don't know if they're going to suit the club or hit the ground running. It's a bit of a risk, especially with this board. I don't know whether I trust them to make the right appointment.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, Solskjaer as a manager has done great, kind of getting the players in, some of these young players that he's managed to get into the club and kind of starting a rebuild. But I just don't know whether he's hit a wall now with how far he can actually take it.
Yeah, I think that's the theme I'm hearing from a lot of United fans is they're convinced that this is the limit of his abilities, and with the team he's got in front of him, any other top class coach will be doing a lot better. I think that's the feeling most of us have, isn't it? Really.
I mean, yeah, you've got the likes of Conte and Zidane out there, who are potentially looking for a job. I'm sure they'd have their eyes on that seat. So it's interesting. Let's just see how. I know these next 12 games, United have got a very rough October, and I think we've got to play everyone in the top six. Key games in the Champions League, so we can't really rest any players. Must-win games now, depending obviously on the result against Villarreal as well. If we don't win that game, the pressure will be on us.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the young boys result in the back of his mind, then obviously the Europa League final against Villarreal still quite fresh, really, wasn't it? It was a terrible performance against them last time out. He needs to show some noticeable changes from that pattern, really. He certainly needs to take the initiative and take the game to Villarreal, that's for sure, because if he plays it conservatively, it's not going to wash with fans. We need to see some kind of I don't know, strutting a little bit. We're Manchester United. On this stage, we should be sweeping Villarreal aside. And I think he'll play it too safe, though. That's the fear I've got. And it'll be a really dull encounter. I hope I'm wrong. But I'm trying not to be too negative because, I mean, we're still level on points with City and Chelsea. Whether we deserve to be or not is irrelevant, really, because we are, and that's the reality. So we're still at the moment in with a fighting chance of staying at the top of the table come going into October. So it's not a bad position to be in. But again, the next two results, even Villarreal and Everton, if we lose or draw even both of those, that's going to be a bit of a change, isn't it, for the mood towards Solskjaer going forward?
Yeah. I don't know. The thing is he's been in this situation before where he's been under pressure and we're thinking, surely we can't keep going like this, and he's just managed to pull a couple of results out of that. Somehow, he's still in the job, and to be fair to him, last year we thought, oh, we're making some progress, and obviously we came second. But it was completely marred by that performance in the Europa League final. Was absolutely horrendous. It was almost like we're taking these steps back too often. There's just no clear progress for me.
Yeah, it is like just stalling, isn't it, really? But anyway, back to the game itself, because I mean, it was fairly end to end for large spells. I know we created a lot of chances, but there weren't many meaningful ones. And obviously, Villa took the lead late on from a corner, from a set piece. Cavani was on Courtney Hawes, wasn't he, from the goal, and didn't get anywhere near him. And there was nobody on the near post as well, which is crazy in this day and age. So really gutting to concede a goal like that, I would say. But credit to Villa. I think they spotted that weakness. I think they had three very sort of dominant centre-backs who got in and amongst it from all set pieces, really. And I think we've been vulnerable from those for a while. So they deserved the goal. They deserved the win, I think. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes missed a penalty, which is rare for him. I'm not a fan of the kind of putting players off penalty taken and stuff, but I guess you've got to do what you've got to do. And Martinez has got a reputation for doing that, hasn't he? In the Copa America, he was notorious for putting players off penalty taken. So they should have been aware that he was going to do that. I hope this isn't the end of Bruno Fernandes taking penalties, because his record is fantastic. And I think it would be a huge knock to his morale if Cristiano Ronaldo was suddenly put on them, wouldn't it? And I think the club have kind of rallied around him in the right way to sort of support him on the back of it. The same way they did with Jesse Lingard when he gave the ball away for the young boys goal in the Champions League. So the club have done the right thing in protecting Bruno, I think. He'll bounce back. He's a top-level player. But I just hope that that's not the end of his penalty taking duties, because he's still one of the key players for us, really, isn't he?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that. I feel as though probably still be on penalties. I know it looked like Ronaldo really wanted that penalty. So it's hard to know who is the number one for penalties, who's meant to be taking penalties, because surely Ronaldo would know that Bruno's down for a penalty, so why would he ask for it if he isn't, or do they decide between them? Because we saw this nonsense a while ago, didn't we? It was with Rashford. I can't remember. Was it Rashford decided to take a penalty and then he missed it?
Yeah, I think it was. Anytime there's a challenge on the pitch, it doesn't look great for the club either, does it?
Someone asked Solskjaer who was meant to be the they're all penalties. Didn't seem like there was any real.
No, I think his answer was that they decide there and then, almost on the pitch. But I think that's just papering over the fact that there was probably an argument or a disagreement. But he missed the penalty anyway. It was a terrible penalty. I think he felt the pressure put on him by Martinez and the Villa players that were surrounding him. And fair play to Villa. They did what they had to do to get the result, because that would have brought the game square. So it is what it is. United move on, but Villa, fair play to them. They move up the table and they've performed pretty well of late. So I think it would deserve a deserved win and a deserved loss for United, if you're going to look at it in that lens as well. And I think a bit of a lesson for Solskjaer. And again, whether he learns from it, we don't know. We shall see. But the top of the Premier League's looking interesting now, because, like I say, everybody's tied on points except Liverpool, who drew to Brentford in a pretty entertaining 3-3 draw at the Community Stadium. Now, Liverpool are top of the table. Do they deserve to be there, do you think? Because the display against Brentford was end-to-end, and that's credit to Brentford more than anything. They scored 3 pretty decent goals, but they've conceded 3 as well on the counter. And it was a game that was great for the neutrals to watch. I could see both managers sort of nodding in agreement that it was a great game to be part of as well. But there are some kind of worrying signs that they've conceded that many sort of quite soft goals, really, against the Brentford team that are quite far below them in quality, really, aren't they?
Yeah, there's been signs that they've been looked a bit vulnerable at the back of Liverpool at times, and it clearly showed against Brentford. Fair play to Brentford, they took advantage of that, and it was a clear tactic of that they obviously looked at before the game and looked at where they could potentially hurt Liverpool. And it's no surprise to me that they're that much threat going forward, because I've seen them kind of over this last year or so in the Championship. When they got into the playoff final and didn't obviously get promoted the first time, it was still really impressive. They play good football. So some of their players have really impressed me. Tony looks a handful of football. He's able to ball up really well and link play. He brings other players into. But I think it's just their energy. It's really, brilliant to see how they play the game. They just, it's almost a little bit infuriating as a Man United fan, because to see a team like Brentford playing that sort of football, that's the sort of football that wants to
definitely.
But full credit to them. They fully deserve at least a draw. I think it's why I said they wouldn't go down Brentford. I just think they've got some really talented players that play really good brand football. They're also able to defend better what we've seen other teams come up from in the past, though the likes of Norwich, who just can't shut up shop and aren't strong enough at the back to be able to kind of grind any results out. But yeah, Liverpool, they're going to be up there again, aren't they? It will be fight between them, City and Chelsea.
You've ruled out United there by the sound of it. It sounds like you've accepted their fate as being outside the title race now, which is fair enough, to be honest. But I think Liverpool have got the quality, but Brentford, like you say, were almost threw the tactics out the window and just kind of went at Liverpool, and it paid off. I think there was one point where Van Dijk had the measure of Tony for a while, and the instructions from Thomas Frank were for him to move on to Joel Matip instead. And he gave Matip a horrible time, and you could just see him bullying Matip no end and beating him in the air constantly. And they couldn't deal with Tony when he moved away from Van Dijk. And, it's not like they could switch sides either. So they were quite clever in the way they played. And like you say, the brand of football that Brentford are bringing, and the crowd makes such a noise when they're at home as well for such a small stadium, that they're a difficult team to not root for, aren't they, for a neutral? So, yeah, maybe the new Leeds United this season, the surprise package coming up from the Championship, I think. So, yeah, good job and well done to Brentford. The rest of the Premier League, any more highlights for you? Because, I mean, Everton beat Norwich. Obviously, everyone's beating Norwich at the minute. They've lost 6 on the bounce, and they look pretty dead and buried already. But Everton is still up there, aren't they? They're level on points with the top teams. Can you see them finishing highly under Rafa Benitez?
I feel like they're doing well with what they've got. I feel as though the players that they brought in, there would have been a few eyebrows raised. Mari Gray. So yeah, I feel as though he's doing a good job, 100%. Do I feel like they'll be good enough to kind of finish in the European spaces? No, I don't. I feel like it's a strong team, but 100%. If they can finish sort of mid to upper table by the end of the season, I think that'll be a good finish for them. There's going to be a lot of focus on Richarlison, I feel. There was a bit of, there were murmurs about PSG before the Champions, whether he'll kind of seek pastures new. But again, he's a big player, and they've had a few players missing, obviously, recently. So it'd be good for them to get back to their key players to push on in the season. But yeah, I feel as though it's obviously still a bit strange seeing Rafa Benitez at Everton, but I feel as though it's something that Everton fans can definitely come around to, and I feel like he might do well for them, to be honest.
Yeah, that'd be something, wouldn't it? But then I think if it's the kind of appointment where if he did lose two on the bounce, for example, the pressure would be on straight away almost. So he's kind of got to keep his wits about him, really. Leeds lost to West Ham 2-1 at home late. Antonio Goal sealed a win for them. West Ham are actually looking like a team that could compete for European places, aren't they? They've been really impressive so far this season.
Yeah, I think it'll be more of the same as last season. I feel as though they're definitely capable of, getting to the Europa League. I feel as though it's the Champions League is just a bit step too far. It's just the wealth of talent that those top clubs have. It's
yeah,
much I feel for some of the clubs below, looking to make that league. Leicester are another one that I'll probably say my surprise, really, that they've just been very inconsistent at the start of this season, and I just don't know whether that could be to a lack of harmony in the squad. Obviously, the Tillemans came out and spoke about whether he didn't know whether he was going to sign a new contract, he might not. And then obviously Maddison as well. We'll talk about him. May or may not have been made a move in the transfer as well. So it's interesting times there at the minute. I feel as though there will be a lot of eyes on Leicester, and they really need to kind of find a little bit of something, some sort of consistency, because they are shipping goals and they're not getting results from games that people would expect them to get results from. They would have been looking at that. They would have been looking at that Burnley game at the weekend, saying, "Okay, this is one that we should be winning. This is one that can kind of, give them lift off." And it's what they need.
I think Leicester have got a team that should be competing more, but we were saying this last week, me and Miles, that they've just got a lack of confidence in their back four at the minute, because Soyuncu's had a terrible start to the season. That's just carried on from last season, really. And they've got Vestergaard and Ryan Bertrand as well that have come in to replace long-term injuries, and they're just not good enough. You know, they need Fofana back. They've got some players that really would make that defence a lot more difficult to beat. Johnny Evans is a big miss as well. And I think he sort of said that, Brendan Rodgers, at the end of the game. So yeah, the players they've signed to replace those are just not good enough. Their midfield is fantastic on its day. Obviously, Tielemans and Ndidi are sought after by sort of many teams in Europe, let alone the Premier League. Samare played, I think, at the weekend, and he's still got to settle in a little bit, hasn't he? They've got Lookman as well and Harvey Barnes. I think they looked a threat. I thought they looked impressive. So going forward, I don't think they'll have an issue. It's just that midfield, really, that needs settling, and that defence that needs to get back to full strength. But we don't know what goes on behind the scenes in clubs, do we? If Leicester have disharmony in the dressing room, then it's going to show on the pitch. And if that's the reason for their sort of stuttering performances so far this season, then that's a worry as well, because they're such a dependable team in the Premier League that to see them start to sell off some of their best players again will be disappointing. So I hope that's not the case. You know, we're both from sort of Leicester area, aren't we? So we've always been sort of really proud to sort of say how the local team is doing. So if they were to sort of start selling some key players, I really do think they'd sort of slide a little bit, unless their scouting network can really step up their game and keep finding amazing talent. Then they've got some questions to answer this season, because they could struggle if they don't address the slide now.
Yeah, I think their defensive problems. I think if you could put it down to a lack of, you know, whether those players have played together enough. You know, obviously Bertrand and Vestergaard have both come from the same team, so you know they both should know each other's games very well. But again, being put into a back four where you kind of meeting new teammates and you're looking to kind of gain an understanding of how everyone plays in that back line, how to defend set plays, etc.
Yeah.
You know, it might just take a bit of time, and like you say, they probably are missing those experienced players. Obviously, they're missing Fofana still, and yeah, Evans is obviously a big one. So I'm sure they'll be eager to get those players back in as soon as they can.
Yeah, I think also I'm a bit confused why he doesn't start Iheanacho, because at the end of the season, last season, he was playing Vardy and Iheanacho together, and that seemed to be getting the best out of Iheanacho. Definitely, he went on a huge sort of scoring spree, didn't he? And this season, he's not had a look in. So I don't know if that's a change of tactic on Rodgers' behalf, or whether he's just sort of lost faith in Iheanacho. But even so, for a player that thrives on sort of confidence, that's not great for him, because you know he was on such a great run. It's a shame that he's not carrying that on. And it's a lot of pressure on an old Jamie Vardy's shoulders, really, isn't it?
I don't know whether it was kind of because he was forced to put Iheanacho in there, though, because didn't Barnes get injured towards the end of last season, and that's kind of we saw Iheanacho come in, and now all of a sudden he's straight back in, you know, the first 11 again. So yeah, I feel like you might be right. It's probably a little bit unfair. I felt like Iheanacho is probably the better of, you know, the two in Vardy and Iheanacho. Vardy's obviously stayed in there, and that might partly be down to his work rate. Obviously always get a lot of energy out of him, but yeah, again, it's probably a bit bitter. I feel for Iheanacho. He's not getting more game time, not making more starts, not appearances.
Yeah, it's a bit harsh on him. I think Leicester will be okay. I really do. They've just got to stop the slide really sooner rather than later. That's it for now, I think, Dave. We've talked about all the big highlights from the weekend. It's going to be a big week, actually, because there's Champions League football midweek. And then, obviously, the Premier League's back at the weekend. So join us for those. If you like our content, please just hit the subscribe button now. That'd be amazing. And hit the like if you can't do that. But it'd be great to sort of see you back here for future pods. But Dave, thank you for your time, mate. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers, Dave.